Para nosotros esta presentación es, por supuesto, un gran desafío. Es la primera vez que estamos haciendo un día de debate general en línea. Todos estamos aprendiendo cómo funciona este método, pero igualmente les quiero dar a todos ustedes una calurosa bienvenida a nombre del Comité de los Derechos del Niño. Así que buenos días, buenas tardes, buenas noches. Dependiendo del lugar donde se encuentren. Estamos muy felices de poder superar los desafíos que nos pone la pandemia para poder para poder hablar sobre este tema tan importante. Quisiera muy brevemente indicarles algunas pautas, para que este debate se pueda llevar de la mejor manera. Uno de esos aspectos es que nuestros ponentes deben hablar despacio. Y voy a comenzar por mí mismo. Debemos hablar despacio. Igualmente, los participantes pueden enviar sus preguntas en cualquier momento de la sesión. Habrá intérpretes en diferentes idiomas y también habrá subtítulos. Los intérpretes de signos estarán visibles junto al orador, tal cual como ahora se ve. Incluso las normas, estas reglas se están ahorita colocando en pantalla, o estas recomendaciones, mejor dicho. Una buena práctica es que dirijan sus preguntas al panel como grupo, no a una persona concreta. Recordemos que esta sesión se está grabando. Este recordatorio es importante para todos los niños, niñas y adolescentes que están presentes, y es que no pongan sus apellidos, solamente coloquen nombres o seudónimos. Por favor, también es muy importante, sean respetuosos y tengan en cuenta que cualquier pregunta que sea abusiva, no creo que se presente esta situación, sea eliminada. No envíen, por favor, mensajes privados a un niño o a un orador joven. Si quieren hacer seguimiento profesional a un niño o a un joven, por favor, escríbanlo en el chat. Y por último, también tenemos con nosotros a un facilitador gráfico y los dibujos se compartirán después. Dicho esto, me toca ahorita dar la bienvenida a Taylor, ¿verdad? El cual pues se va a presentar y nos va a expresar, digamos, sus opiniones y sus ideas. Adelante, Taylor.
Muy buenos días, buenas tardes, buenas noches, dependiendo de la zona o región de la cual nos estemos encontrando en este importante espacio. Mi nombre es Keylor Aguilar Loaiza, soy de Costa Rica. Soy integrante del equipo asesor infantil y juvenil del Día de Debate General desde marzo del 2020. Desde mis 12 años he participado en la defensa y promoción de los derechos de los niños, de las niñas y de los adolescentes en diferentes campos, principalmente en aquellos en condición de vulnerabilidad. Es importante y necesario recalcar que los estados tienen un compromiso fundamental en el cumplimiento en cabalidad de todos los derechos de las personas menores de edad, priorizando el interés superior del niño. El día de hoy nos encontramos en días de relevancia históricos para la promoción real de los derechos humanos. Los países que aquí se encuentran han pasado por procesos de diálogo, reivindicación y liderazgo. Deseo hacer una mención especial para los países de Centroamérica, las personas que puedan acompañarnos acá de esta bella región, que se encuentran en la celebración del bicentenario de independencia, como lo es mi hermoso país, Costa Rica. El contexto económico, social y la pandemia han agravado cualquier proceso interno y externo. Por ello, Mi mayor admiración a los estados que han hecho un manejo adecuado y sistemático de la pandemia por COVID-19. Me gustaría además que nos regale unas palabras don José Ángel Rodríguez Reyes, miembro del Comité sobre Derechos del Niño y además también de origen latinoamericano. Es realmente un honor y un orgullo poder compartir en este espacio.
Bien, muchas gracias, Taylor, por tu intervención. A continuación, voy a darle la palabra a diversos oradores que nos van a expresar sus opiniones. Pero para ello, nosotros tenemos unas preguntas o unos temas que son orientadores. Por supuesto, no tienen que regirse exclusivamente por estas preguntas, es solamente para orientar el debate. Y es, ¿qué es lo que nosotros sabemos que funciona para los niños no acompañados o separados de sus familias, incluidos los niños migrantes y refugiados, los niños abandonados, los niños con discapacidad, los niños en situación de calle, los niños víctimas de la trata? Sería un tema para orientar este debate. Igualmente, ¿qué ejemplos positivos nosotros conocemos de servicios de reintegración familiar e identificación de opciones de colocación adecuadas? También, y esta pregunta es bien interesante, ¿dónde nos estamos atascando? ¿Cuáles son los problemas? ¿Y cómo podemos abordar esos desafíos? Y también muy importante, ¿qué pueden hacer los gobiernos para lograrlo? Bien. Dicho esto, señaladas estas palabras o estas líneas orientadoras, quisiera entonces dar la palabra a la primera oradora, que es Yara, una joven de Afganistán, y creo que todos estamos muy interesados en escuchar tu intervención.
Hello everyone. My name is Yara. I'm from Afghanistan. I'm 19 years old and I'm living in Athens, Greece. I used to be an accompanied minor due to a ship work that took place when I was 14 years old. When that happened, I lost my family and everything I had, my dreams, my goals, and my hope. And of course, I felt that I lost my future too. I stayed at the Iceland for some weeks, but it was hard to me because the sound of the sea reminded me that the moment of the accident. After that, I relocated to Athens and I stayed at a camp for a few months. The everyday life there was not easy either. The people there took care of me, but I still felt alone. With the help of Metadrasi NGO, I found a foster family. They opened their home to me and accepted me like I was a member of their family. I started going to school, learn English, but still I felt the darkness. At the time, the only thing that kept me going is knowing that I had a family in Sweden. That was something that made me regain and build up my hope, my dreams, and hope, and make goals for my future. I managed to visit to Sweden for the first time when I was 16 years old. My mother's aunt lived there with her family and children. I was allowed to go to school, enjoy activities, do winter sports, and even learn how to swim. Everything was adorable and wonderful. I felt like I was again at home and belonged again and reborn. When I turned 18, due the Dublin relocation and after many reunification applications that got rejected, I was informed by Swedish government that I should to return to Greece. That was heartbreaking for me because I lost my home, my family, once again. Always I'm thinking that how people and governments can be so strict and inhuman. Children are our huge part of society. They have the right and we have the obligations to protect them from anything. It's our responsibility to take care of them mentally and physically. I'm trying my best to find a solution and make things work, but I cannot achieve it by my own. I need more understanding, compassion, and acceptance, not only for me, but for everyone who is going through like me. Through my experience and what I have been through, I learned that children can make this world a better place. I will keep trying to make every tomorrow better than yesterday. It's a challenge for me, and I accepted that I will never stop fighting for me and for others. Children are our future. Thank you so much, everyone.
Yara, de verdad, muchísimas gracias por tu intervención.
Thank you very much for your words. We have heard your strong message and we take a good notes of what you have said. Thank you very much. And now I'm going to give the floor to Peter, the second speaker. Is he there?
Peter could not attend because of poor internet connection, so we will be sharing a video instead from him. Thank you.
Ok, bueno, ojalá Peter pueda conectarse dentro de poco.
I hope Peter will connect.
Habari, naitwa Peter. Ninawakilisha watoto ambao hawana uangalizi.
Me llamo Peter.
Wakimbizi,
no he podido
watoto wanaoishi mitaani, watoto wanaosafirishwa bila ya
estar aquí
kibali maalum, watoto wenye ulemavu. Watoto hao wana uangalizi gani ili kupatiwa mahitaji yao pamoja na haki zao. Mambo yanayofanya kazi
hacer que se den accesos a sus derechos
watoto hao ni pamoja na kupendwa
y que tengan conocimiento de los niños que viven en la calle y que podamos acceder a lo básico, que son nuestras necesidades básicas, el agua, comida, un techo, el derecho a acceder también a servicios sociales. Todo eso es muy importante para nosotros.
Utengwa bajeti ili kuwasaidia watoto wenye uhitaji. Asanteni sana.
Sorry, Jose, you were muted. Thank you.
¿Ahora se me escucha? Perfecto.
Can you hear me now? Okay. We will look I would like to send a message to Peter to thank his words and to send a message of tolerance, which is so important. I'd like to give the floor to our third speaker, Mrs. Roxana Pardo. She's from Argentina. I can see you. Roxana, it's now your turn. Hello.
¿Puedes echarme una mano?
Hello, everybody.
Se me ha bloqueado. Está traduciendo
My name is
Susana.
Roxana Pardo. I'm 20. And this week is very special for me because I'm going to graduate from a religious institution in Argentina. Since I was a kid, he was in the alternative mode. I knew Excel, and we are young people. We are accompanied by our peers. Today, I can give you my experience. What does work and what's important in the accompaniment of our people, we people, and children separated from our families. I'd like to talk from three points of view. Before getting to a home, I was with my grandparents, but they were poor, and I was in villages SOS in Bolivia. And you know what? It was very useful for them because we received economic aid, but in fact, it didn't happen. I was in this institution for many years. We didn't have financial help. At the beginning, I wasn't surprised that I lived so many years in institutions, but now I understood it wasn't a good idea because I missed a lot. I missed the sense of family. I missed of care, because carers in institutions don't have this role. They don't listen to us. They don't know what are our needs. And they don't know what are the questions to pose. They don't know to ask questions. And this doesn't happen just to me.
¿Un problema?
Do you have a problem? I'm translating into the English channel because she's speaking in Spanish. This doesn't happen just to me. Nobody asks us how we are. We are only in contact with a social team every 7 months. Entering an institution is a shock. We don't get help from institutions. We need to ask for numbers, places where we can live, and we have to ask for help. I have the privilege to have other people accompanying me. In Argentina today, we have a law for accompanying. It's like being with us and we don't feel alone anymore. In institutions, we're always told that we are alone and that we have to solve everything by ourselves. But now I understand this is not the case everywhere. Autonomy for me was the synonym of being alone, loneliness. But autonomy, in fact, is to share the burden, to have my own links, my own relations, and to be supported by people who help me really. My reference person is my friends and the people who help me every day. I'm really concerned for all those youth who don't have any support from institutions. So, how to tackle the needs of children and teenagers, we people that are separated from our families? We need to create new strategies. We start from ideas, methodologies that really work in other countries. We need that. We need resources. And we need all people around us to be really qualified to listen to us and to generate responses to the situations and the realities of each of us. We need to be accompanied and to be prepared for the future. And to end my intervention, people say we are the future, but what do we expect if we don't take care of children and adolescents in the present? Thank you very much. What is there to expect? Thank you.
Thank you very much for your words. You have addressed to questions that are of great importance, and I could say it would be answered by those speakers who are going to give us their opinion on this relevant matter. So I'm going to present the first speaker, Susan Lamay, who is Officer of Welfare of the District of Tororo, the government of Uganda. So welcome, and you can start with your statement.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, the chair and the moderator of this session. Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to the members in this session. My name is Alamai Susan. I am a probation and social welfare officer working with Tororo District Local Government in Uganda. I am a senior social worker and an advocate for the rights of all children, working to promote the overall well-being of children in my district. Over the last 5 years, I have been coordinating the care reform agenda at the district level in my district. Specifically, I have facilitated the reintegration of children from residential care facilities within the district and set up family-based alternative care options. Over 200 children have since been reintegrated. We have also identified and are working with over 20 foster parents who are offering both emergency, long-term care for children in need of alternative care. We are currently working with young adults to set up supported independent living. Some of the key considerations from these processes have been that, number one, children without parental care should be promptly reintegrated into their families and communities through a robust case management process, including family tracing, careful planning, follow-up, and monitoring and evaluation. A case management toolkit developed by the ministry responsible for children has been instrumental to guiding this process in Uganda. It is important to understand the difference between reunification, which is the act of returning a child to his or her family, and reintegration, the desired result of which a child is established in a safe, stable, and nurturing family environment. It is important to note that care and time have to be taken into account for the success of each reintegration. In Uganda and in my district in particular, we now recognize the importance of a case management package, especially designed to support reintegration, including a series of benchmarks to help track progress from the point of reunification of the child through to successful reintegration. Another consideration is that premature placement of separated children back into their families without addressing the push and pull factors that led to family separation in the first place can result in further family breakdown and even secondary separation. It is important that we think of post-placement support systems and follow-up mechanisms when transitioning children living outside the family environment. In Uganda, we have parasocial workers at the community level that are key in coordinating and delivering post-reunification support and monitoring the placements. These have been given tailor-made skills to follow up to provide psychosocial support and facilitate linkages to other support services for the families. Also to keep in mind is the importance of providing holistic care services. A coherent response requires deliberate identification of children without parental care, trust and relationship building with these children, and their integration into families and societies. A core package of health, nutrition, education, child protection, social protection services, and skilled workforces should be available to these children to enable them catch up on their development milestones. This holistic package of support should also be available for at-risk families to avoid separation. All the above should be done alongside advocacy for systems to strengthen families and prevent separation in the first place, while also promoting the use of family-based care alternatives. The district has a community-based services department that is responsible for this. We have been able to prevent over 50 separations of children from their families. This has been possible through support to families in terms of coordinated linkages to essential services. What are some of our challenges? Some of the challenges we face include: 1, placement of children from ethnic and minority communities. We have found it challenging to successfully integrate the children from these communities because of stigma and cultural differences. It is important to sensitize the host community on the cultural practices and the specific challenges these children might face to ensure that their best interest is taken into account. The lack of specific support to families during providing family-based alternative care, such as in foster care and domestic adoption. Government has no direct incentives for these families, so they work within their existing means to provide for their children. We are currently advocating for targeted social protection incentives to encourage more families to embrace foster care and domestic adoption. We have inadequate workforce with limited logistics to effectively support children and families. In Uganda, we have 1 community development officer per sub-county. And each sub-county in my district, Tororo, has an average of 5,000 households. Each household has 5 people in it. And we have 1 probation officer for a whole district, which has 102,627 households. The community-based volunteers or resource persons are equally few and not adequately supported to do their work. Government could address these challenges by adopting: 1, advocacy for mindset change to embrace alternative care for all children, ensuring that through affirmative action, such families on a case-by-case basis are deliberately made beneficiaries of all socioeconomic empowerment programs of government. Thirdly, we are also proposing that the government invests more in capacity building.
Por favor, finalizando por el tiempo.
Sorry, could you just start finishing your presentation if it's possible?
Okay, invest more in capacity building and strengthening for the social welfare workforce for this effective services delivery, and then increase the numbers of government technical staff engaged in reintegration of children back into the appropriate care options. We also propose development of volunteer management policy and framework, and then finally document the good practices and use them to roll out to the other districts. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Susana Lamay, for your words. Now we're going to give the floor to the second speaker, which is who is Angela Marshall. She is Senior Child Protection Technical Advisor for the Syria Response Office.
Hi, everybody. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Fantastic. Great. Hello, everyone. It is really an honor to be joining this panel discussion, and thank you to the committee for the opportunity to share Save the Children's work with unaccompanied and separated children in Northeast Syria. I will start by sharing a bit of background on the context and then highlight the dynamics and complexities of our alternative care programs. I will then close with some considerations for improving practice going forward. Northeast Syria is a de facto autonomous region consisting of 6 sub-regions or governorates. It is not recognized by the government of Syria or internationally. And according to 2019 OCHA figures, there are around 3 million people living in Northeast Syria, some 120,000 people living in 12 camps and informal settlements. And these are mixed population groups: Syrian internally displaced people, Iraqi refugees, and other foreign nationals who are known as third country nationals and represent more than 40 nationalities. Third country nationalities are confined to 2 camps, Al-Hol and Roj. The many nationalities and mix of ethnic and religious influences, including children and families, with real or perceived links to ISIS amongst the beneficiaries and host communities requires that our child protection response take account of this diversity. The Child Protection Area of Responsibility estimates that there are around 15,000 unaccompanied and separated children in Northeast Syria due to family separation resulting from conflict, the death of parents and carers, child marriage, and recruitment. But accurate numbers are hard to access, and identification can be sensitive due to cases of unaccompanied boys being placed in detention due to presumed affiliation with ISIS or other groups. Save the Children is the main provider of alternative care for unaccompanied and separated children in several of these overcrowded and unsafe camps. Implementation of care arrangements are supervised by a team of experienced case management staff and guided by a comprehensive body of standards, guidelines, and training materials, which clearly outline eligibility criteria and state when they should be used as an interim solution. Our teams support care arrangements that include kinship care, foster care, supported independent living, and child-headed households, as well as the provision of interim residential care. In this dire and unpredictable humanitarian situation, there are significant challenges in all forms of alternative care. Emergency preparedness plans, advocating for a child's best interest in returns processes, and focusing on ethical handover and exit strategies are our ongoing priorities. There are also limitations on the application of best interest determination, which requires the participation of government actors. Globally, Save the Children advocates for family preservation and family-based alternative care options to be considered first. And in this context, it's no exception. Kinship care continues to be the most common form of alternative care registered by our teams. However, in this context, we've also had no choice but to use interim residential care for some children where family-based care options are just not possible or would place that child or family at risk. These centers were established initially to receive unaccompanied and separated Iraqi and Syrian children who were caught up in conflict-related displacement. For example, 2 Syrian brothers, ages 9 and 11, were brought to one of our interim care centers. The boys had been kidnapped by their father several years earlier to join the Islamic State, and when fleeing IS territory, their father died of an infection. Our staff provided care for the boys, and tracing efforts began to find their mother. And we were able to track her down through social media, and they were successfully reunited. After the fall of Baghouz in 2019, an increasing number of children from third countries have been in our care in interim care centers. For these unaccompanied children, the options are few and the risks are high. Repatriation processes to countries of origin are complex and slow-moving, if happening at all. And due to security concerns and limitations on access, family-based care options are extremely limited. There are cases of unaccompanied and foreign children eligible for repatriation being forcibly hidden in tents to prevent them from being returned home. Efforts to strengthen foster care face resistance from authorities, and there are concerns about stigma of children with perceived ISIS links and a lack of trained and suitable carers. The camp administration also views the interim care centers as a safer environment for these vulnerable children because they are easier to keep track of and they are given access to learning and psychosocial support away from elements in the camp that foster ISIS ideologies. It is the camp administration who ultimately makes decisions about which children enter and leave these centers. But because of these risks, third country national children are often admitted to these in greater numbers than Iraqi children. But still, we continue to work with all affected communities to increase safe family-based care safe family-based alternative care options in the community. And this includes strengthening and systematizing what's already in place with a focus on information management and emergency preparedness, continuing to advocate for repatriation in line with best interests of the child, working to decrease stigma and discrimination faced by third country national children, working to better understand community attitudes and existing structures, and increasing the capacity of relevant local institutions and organizations to strengthen child protection systems more broadly. And while none of the children in the interim care centers are placed there due to disability status, some unaccompanied and separated children in humanitarian contexts, as in all contexts, do also have disabilities. And we cannot have separate standards for children with disabilities than we do for children without disabilities. We share the vision of many here today for children to grow up in safe and loving families, but there are some circumstances in which that vision is not immediately possible, and so residential care may be needed as a temporary last resort. Pathways out of the interim care centers include repatriation, and Save the Children advocates globally for states to support the repatriation of children. Last year, a British child supported by Save the Children was taken home to safety. If there were not the option of placing a...
Si puede ir resumiendo.
2 minutes, half a minute, 30 seconds.
Gracias.
Could you finish? Thank you.
1 second. Just to say that if there were not the option of placing a child in temporary residential care in Syria, they would be at much greater risk. And so if the advice to those with power to determine care arrangements for children does not include guidance on residential care options, it makes them much harder to regulate, measure, monitor, and eventually close. And through acknowledging the complexity, we can really work together to improve children's rights in alternative care. Thank you so much.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Angela, for your words. Now I'm going to give the floor to the third speaker. He's Mr. James Kofi Annan. He is a member of NGO, which is called Challenging Heights from Ghana. So you've got the floor, Mr. James. You've got the floor. Okay.
Thank you very much. And I must say I'm honored to be part of this conversation. I've heard a lot from the previous speakers, and I must say that the context of the conversation have been well laid. Children have rights, and those rights spans from the Convention on the Rights of Children, and within the context of the Convention on the Rights of Children, countries are supposed to enact laws that then protect children and protect their rights. Now, within our context, especially in Ghana, we have the Children's Act that spells out what the rights of children are. And the Act states that when a child is born, whether the child was born out of wedlock or in wedlock, whether the child's parents are living together or they are not living together, whether they are still married or they are not married, they are both responsible for the care of the child that they bring. Now, if they fail to do that, the law prescribes punishment for the spouses who default in care. Now, in the absence of parents, the state takes responsibility. And that is what leads to the sections of our laws that then takes the responsibility of parents away, responsibility to children away from parents, and gives it directly to the government. Now, under our Domestic Violence Act, it's clearly stated that children are entitled to certain services when they are affected by domestic violence, i.e., separation, unaccompanied, victims of trafficking. They are all classified under domestic violence. Now, it's also stated in our human trafficking law that governments, in response to protecting the rights of children, is supposed to establish rehabilitation and recovery centers in all of our regions of the country, which then means that when a child has been neglected or is unaccompanied or first victim of trafficking, that child will be taken care of by the state through the establishment of these care centers. And we know that child who is not accompanied or victim of trafficking or child labor or victim of forced marriage is in need of food, is in need of medical care, is in need of education, is in need of psychosocial support and counseling, is in need of a whole lot of things, including protection from further harm and further violence. Which means that the facilities that are supposed to be established must have all those facilities, all those services provided to the children. Unfortunately, we don't have these facilities established. The whole country, we have only 2 functional government centers that will be able to support these children. Now, what has worked for us is that private organizations, NGOs, have established some of these centers to take over the responsibilities that have been entrusted to government and to provide the services to the children. The services in the case of Challenging Heights has been the establishment of our rehabilitation and recovery center that address issues that are affecting victims of trafficking, especially children victims of domestic violence, of forced marriage, of the core act or the core work of Challenging Heights, which is human trafficking. We provide them with medical care, and in a lot of cases, the children that comes through our center, and I'll give a context to that. Every year, we have an average of 150 children coming through our recovery center. And about 90% of these children, who are mainly victims of trafficking and domestic violence and forced marriage, come with various forms of diseases. So we know that in order to do effective reintegration of these children with their families and with their community, you need to provide recovery or care or treatment for these diseases. And we are talking about some of the girls who come with lifelong diseases, such as hepatitis B, HIV, AIDS, and we're also talking about short-term diseases that are treatable, such as bilharzia, typhoid, malaria, etc. You need to treat this, and we make sure that in collaboration with our medical centers, we treat these ailments before we reintegrate them, as well as trying to support them with basic literacy, so that these children who usually come without any form of education can now read and write basic things, as well as supporting them psychosocially in order to treat the trauma that they've gone through. Now, we do all these things because we know that one of the reasons why these children fall victim to trafficking and these kind of social and domestic violence is poverty at home and lack of support from parents and communities. So you don't want the children to go back home to be with their parents when they already have these diseases and the parents will not be able to take care of them, and then they will fall back to the same situation as they were taken. And because of these services that we provide to these children, for the past 16 years that we have done our work, we've had only about 3% of failure in reintegrating children back to their society. And we believe that this is a good practice. This is a best practice that needs to be studied and needs to be scaled and needs to be disseminated for other countries or other organizations to look at how can they take this basic model coming from Challenging Heights in order to be able to also scale it or translate it into their context or adopt it into their context. For children who are unaccompanied, children who are victims of trafficking and so on and so forth, to survive and thrive in their communities when they are reintegrated, there is a need for a conscious effort to address all the issues that they come with and address the underlying causes of parental care and parenting, as well as diseases and other psychosocial problems, in order that when they are reintegrated, they will feel that they are part of the family and nothing will separate them any longer.
Sorry, Chair, you're on mute again.
Disculpen.
Excuse me. Sorry. Thank you very much, James, for your words. And now I'll give the floor to a representative from Nepal. I have the name here, Milan. I'm sorry, I can't pronounce it properly. Milan Garets, Director, Executive Director of the National Council for the Rights of the Child. Thank you. Go ahead.
Thank you, Chair Mr. Jose Angel and the co-chair Keller. Actually, most of the issues has been already raised and discussed by the previous speakers and the discussants. We support the views from the young speakers and the discussants presented here before. I am Milan Laret from the National Child Rights Council, the government of Nepal, Ministry of Women and Children. We talk about the unaccompanied and separated children. Basically, we talk about the four main issues. The first one is how to prevent unnecessary and harmful separation. The second one is how to trust and reunite children back in the family. And the third is how to promote alternative care that reduces institutionalization of children. And finally, how we can promote safe, supportive, and caring families. In that sense, the government of Nepal has adopted various policy measures, from the constitutions to the various domestic laws. When we talk the constitutions, it has considered children's rights as the fundamental rights. And at the same time, the best interest of child has been recognized as the state policy in constitution. In addition to that, we have several domestic laws that protect children's right to education, right to health, right to unnecessary separations, and children's right to grow in a caring families. We do have a law that also suggests the international human rights treaties can be applied as good as domestic laws. So if there are some gaps in the domestic laws, we can even invoke international human rights conventions that we are party to. In that sense, the government of Nepal has implemented some efforts to protect children from unnecessary separations and ensure that the separated children have accessed and enjoyed their rights. That starts from preventing separations. We have 12 different types of social security schemes that includes educational support, health support, cash allowance for the families, and also cash support to the foster family and kinship care. That is the social security schemes. And at the same time, we do have some emergency support for children in vulnerability, children in difficult situations. Then we have Hello.
Aló. Hemos tenido algunos problemas de comunicación. Es normal en estas situaciones, pero si puede ir concluyendo, por favor.
Sorry, I actually couldn't get it.
Yes, we've had communications problems, but now it's okay.
Okay, thank you. So I was talking about the efforts of the government of Nepal. That is starting from the preventions, and in the prevention efforts, we have particularly the social security schemes. That's basically, is it okay now?
Sí, also.
¿Sí?
Is it fine?
Sí.
Yes, I think you may continue. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Elsa. And then, in addition to that, we do have emergency support system for children. The government of Nepal run 2 special helpline, the 1098 as a child helpline that provides support for children in any emergency context, which is a toll-free, and the children can call them without any cost. There is another helpline, 104, that's basically for the missing children and separated children. Any separated and missing children can make call to the 104, and the government system would respond to that. They do some rescue actions and family tracing, and at the same time, they also provide reintegration and rehabilitation support. We have started deinstitutionalization of the children who are unnecessarily institutionalized in an institutional care. The government of Nepal has closed down last year 35 child care homes and reintegrated more than 500 children from the institutional care back to their families. We also reunited missing children and unnecessarily separated children, children in the street, children in labor, and children victim of trafficking. Some 3,445 children have been reunited with their families. We have been promoting the decentralized and localized child protection system. That includes the deployment of child welfare officers at local level, and at the same time, the psychosocial care and case manager, as suggested by Susan Alami, that's same here in Nepal. We are also promoting alternative care with the promotion of kinship care and foster family care. We are taking some policy reformation initiatives at the same time. So what is the key learning from Nepal is basically when the key for the rights of the children who are being unnecessarily separated or at risk is to be prevented from separations. And that requires the social protection system. That requires the local child protection mechanisms and services available at local level. At the same time, we need a robust campaign that change the public norms, the mentality, the traditional thoughts on the institutionalization of children, the traditional thoughts of separating children for better future, which actually harming their future and creating more risk. We need a proper regulations of institutional care facilities that includes temporary shelters or transit service providers or child care services. And in addition to that, the role of international development cooperation is very significant here, because most of the time, the institutionalization of children happen with the orphanage tourism, orphanage trafficking, and even the child trafficking on the name of adoption. So it is important that the development cooperations, the international common understandings needs to be built on this, and development partners and agencies are necessarily to collaborate with the government system to have a sustaining and effective system for the children. Finally, I supported second to the voice of ARR, Peter, and Roxana that children has right to grow in a caring family with their own culture, own identity, and to understand their own society. They are the future of our world, and they are the partners in today's world. Thank you.
Sí. Gracias.
Thank you, Mr. Milan, for your words. We had technical problems with our communication system, but I think it's all okay. Now we have the interesting part, which is a discussion, Q&A between participants. And in this discussion, tries to answer some of the questions that have been posted in the chat. In this sense, if you want to take the floor, please raise your hand and we will give you the floor.
Bien.
Hello, Chair. You will see the first question in the chat. Question 1.
Sí, aquí tenemos algunas
Here
preguntas.
we have a series of questions. Is there a definition of parental care? Because many children are sent to an orphanage or internship and in a center, and they are separated from the parents. Is a definition of what constitutes parent care? There's another question: how to ensure that deinstitutionalized children or regrouped children have social workers that supervise their rights and that guarantee a proper care, and how to face the pressure of thousands and thousands of children who are at the borders of the United States and in Europe and in the Middle East. There's another question: what can we do when there's a necessary separation of their parents? How can we encourage and support children in alternative care centers or care families? How can we locate more foster families or care families? In the chat, you have many other questions. There's a study that was carried out in this sense.
Excuse me, Chair. Thank you. I wanted to mention that there have been certain questions collected, and if panelists would kindly turn their videos on, I can spotlight them and the chair can reference the questions that have been collected in the chat and address them to the panelists, perhaps. Thank you so much.
Ok. Bien, si algún ponente desea intervenir.
Okay, if any of the panelists or participants want to take the floor in order to answer these questions on the chat, you can raise your hand and speak.
Pareciera que no.
It seems nobody wants to speak. The minister, from Nepal, Milan, please go ahead.
Thank you. Actually, these all are questions very wonderful. They are, in fact, very challenging too. I start with the definition of parental care. Of course, the parental care actually cannot be defined in institutionalized system. When we talk about parental care, it must have a live family or live guardian. And in an institution, it's actually the rule settings and a routine system can cover. So definitely an institutional care does not cover a complete parental care. So that's why it affects the growth of the children, and we cannot support and accept institutional care in the long run. When we talk about the deinstitutionalized children's long-term care and ensure that they are not re-victimized, I totally agree with another concerns that the funding, the financing, and the child protection system must be strengthened at local level, because they are the doorstep government. They are the doorstep facilities for the children. That's why in Nepal, we have a legal system for the case management, and we have a legal provision that all the local government must have a local counselors and local case workers. They should be liable to report back to the local government and make sure that the children have access to the facilities. However, this system is just growing. We're still in the testing period, but it seems it's going to bring us good result. Thank you.
am I permitted to say something?
¿Aló?
Hello?
Señor James, ¿está pidiendo la palabra? ¿Puede intervenir?
Yes,
you can go ahead.
The question has been directed, and there are two quick ones. Is there a definition of what constitutes parental care? Yes. And in our definition, we don't stretch it so much. We are not looking at luxurious care. We are not looking at affluent care. What we are looking at is the basic care that is basically defined by Maslow's hierarchy of needs, probably the first and second hierarchy of needs. We're talking about physiological needs, we are talking about developmental needs, we are talking about needs of protection. That's basically the kind of care, the standard of care we are talking about. A child must have a place to sleep, a very safe place to sleep. The child must have food to eat. The child must feel love from his or her parents, and the child must feel protected by everyone, as well as being allowed to acquire his future or her future, which is education. So that's what constitutes care for us. I think the other question is whether children are encouraged and supported to be in touch with their parents, birth parents. In our case, it doesn't even arise because we are very transitional. You come into our care for 6, maximum 9 months, you are gone. So yes, even within that short period, we allow the parent to come and see the children, eat with them, have conversations with them, to begin the reintegration process, so that it doesn't become like we only lift the children and place them with the parent when there has been a break in the bond between the parents. So once you are with us, we'll begin to recreate the bond until we have done the reintegration. I think basically these are the 2 questions that were directed at me.
I see there's a question for...
Señor James.
Sí,
hay muchas preguntas en el chat, por ejemplo.
Yeah, there are many questions in the chat box that are put forward by ONG, like Save the Children. And I will ask the speakers to read the questions, and if they want to answer to the questions, feel free.
So we have collated the questions in the chat box for the panelists. So I'm going to read the 3 questions, and the panelists can answer which questions they would like. So one of the questions is on temporary residential care. This often becomes permanent. So how can we address this? The other one is that how do we cope with thousands of abandoned and placed children at the US border and in Europe and the Middle East as well? And pushbacks are common illegal practice across the globe. How do the panelists see pushbacks in relation to states' obligations towards migrant and refugee children, including children in families and unaccompanied minors? Thank you.
Okay. So I think I will raise my hand. I'll take I think one of the questions is directly to me, so I'll take that one and leave the rest for my colleague panelists. Temporary placement in shelters ending up becoming permanent. Yes, we have had stories of that coming from other centers for children who are supposed to be there, be in a recovery center for a few months or a couple of years, then it becoming forever. Those have been documented. But in the case of challenging height, I think we have had our a lot of our teeth being honed by an organization called Family for Every Child. And I believe that Family for Every Child might be on this score as well, where we have subscribed to certain values, the values that we believe in, that the place of a child to grow up in and from is the family and is his own community. So we are, and we have seen this to work in our setting. So we don't keep children beyond 1 year. No, it doesn't happen. There's no single child that might go beyond 1 year. We've had a few cases of children who are brought to us by either partner institutions or by the government, because maybe the case of the child or children are in court, and therefore the court would order that until the case is adjudicated to its final conclusion, the child must be in an institutional care, or it must be in our care. In that case, we have to obey the court order, and therefore will not be able to reintegrate the child. Apart from this kind of order, or maybe our lack of ability to trace the parents of the children, there would not be any situation where a child would be in our center for more than a year. So that is our and it has worked for us. It is not like the model has failed. The model has worked because of the care practices and the number of other care services that will bring together on a particular child to make sure that the healing process and the recovery process becomes comprehensive, so that when you go back home, there will be no need for you to fall victim to whatever made you unaccompanied.
Does anyone else in the panel want to speak?
Susan, you are on mute.
Gracias,
Thank you.
señor James. Sí, otra persona que Susan.
Okay, I want to respond to question labeled question 1, but there are more than one question 1s. How can children in alternative care be encouraged and supported in establishing, maintaining contact with their birth parents, even when the parent is in prison or detention? We all realize that there are roles of different service providers, stakeholders. Government has a primary role of supervising and creating engagement. As a probation officer, that is their task. So the different stakeholders in every government need to work together to make sure that the systems are flowing. It's the responsibility of a probation officer to make sure that these parents who are separated from their parents get into contact with them and make scheduled visits for the children to check on their parents, or if that is practically not possible, link them up with the closest relatives of these people. And then the contact is established and strengthened. And then the question on parental care. I would really think that equating children in a boarding school to being in an institutional care would really not be correct, because one, children are taken to a school for studies. There is a regulated contact between the parents and the children. The parents willingly pay the tuition for their children. They have visitation days, which is different from the child care institution, residential care. There is contact which is regulated, and at given times you find that there is contact between children and the parents. That is my opinion on that one. Thank you. And at the end of the day, the children go back home. Thank you. I hope my hand is down. Yeah.
Hi, everybody.
Muchas gracias. Ahora, Ángela, Marcia, creo que quiere intervenir. Adelante.
Hi, thank you very much.
Angela, you've got the floor.
I'm hearing the translation. Okay, great. I wanted to respond also to the important question around temporary alternative care sometimes becoming permanent, or the concern that it could be permanent, and how we can address that. And I can share a little bit how we in Northeast Syria are addressing that important question and very urgent one as well. One thing is to say that we do all that we can at the level of the individual child for family tracing and reunification and tireless advocacy for repatriation of individual children. So directing our attentions and energies in a very focused way at that. At the same time, we also recognize that this interim care center is in a wider kind of temporary structure of the camp itself. So the specificities of this context are also at play, and there are increasing returns, whether back to Iraq or back to other parts of Northeast Syria. So we are kind of constantly responding and being aware of those dynamics in the camp setting. And at the same time, and I think my colleagues have also talked about this, there really are so many stakeholders with whom to engage and at different levels. And so this is, as mentioned, in the community level, but also with camp authorities. And for example, we've been successful in advocating on a case-by-case basis for foster care placements for third country national children. And we will continue to do so. But it also means engaging in dialogue with donors and other child protection and humanitarian actors to raise awareness, to try to shift that practice and promote family-based care. So it really, I think, takes a very collective and coordinated response at multiple levels to ensure that these don't become permanent solutions. Thank you. Over.
Yeah, I wanted to intervene shortly. There's a question about whether or not the panel agrees that we cannot have one solution fixing every situation. Yes, I agree. You cannot have one solution that will fit in every context. And so even with challenging heights in Ghana, I've kept on talking about trafficking of children, because that is where we have our strongest work. And I've also spoken about violence against children. I've spoken about child marriage. But there are so many other issues related to children in mining, children in quarry, and so on and so forth. So we cannot transpose challenging heights solution to every child in Ghana. Now, luckily for me, and I have been a chair of the board of Family for Every Child, which is a global organization, alliance, that is based, headquartered in UK, but in several countries. I have been involved in that organization, and we have seen that the composition of our membership brings a certain value that helps with peer learning and sharing best practices. So for instance, somebody is looking at child soldiers. Another person, like my organization, Challenging Heights, is looking at child trafficking. But we also have organizations that are looking at child migrants, and so on and so forth. So with this array of diversified national organizations coming together, you will be able to know what program works, what practices don't work, and be able to adapt. So there's no way one solution will fit all, but we can learn from other solutions that work and adapt to them. That is what I believe we should all learn to do.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much, James, for your words. Now we have the opportunity to answer other additional questions. If any of our speakers or discussants would like to answer to the chat questions, go ahead. All right. It seems that some of the questions that have been posed in the chat have been already answered. I believe this is the moment, the right moment to thank all the speakers, discussants, and all the speakers for their participation. It's been a challenging experience because of the technical problems that we have. And we've learned from this experience, indeed, and we're going to draw important conclusions. Very briefly, I'd like to make a summary of some of the ideas that have been mentioned here during this session. Yes, sorry. I think that Yara or Roxana would like to answer to any of the questions. Yes, excuse me. Yes. Yes, my apologies, but maybe Yara or Roxana or any of the children and youth who spoke before, would you like to take the floor? Any of you?
Kaylor también.
Oh, Kaylor also. Yes, Jose Angel and dear colleagues and friends, I would like to say that we all agree here in the sense that alternative care should have to be just a means for, not just the rule, so that minors, youngsters live through alternative care. It should be just a means. It's just a temporary need that have to be catered for, and in a way to locate children and youth with close people, with their families later on. In different countries, in different states, it's very difficult to see an integral plan, a comprehensive plan for the benefit of minors in general. And this should be the discussion and the debate. And we need to have more studies and more public policies, and states should promote and encourage and help organizations in order to solve the integral needs of people, not just to see a minor as an object that can be taken from one place to the other. It's important. We need an integral policy. Thank you.
Gracias.
Thank you. If any of the young people who have taken the floor before would like to say something now, it's now your turn.
No. Pareciera que no. Voy a ver.
Okay, I'll check that.
Pues parece que no.
Well, it seems that nobody wants to take the floor now.
Sin embargo, ¿se me escucha?
Can you hear me now?
Sí, aquí me están informando que se me escucha.
Yes. I think my image is just blocked, but I suppose you can hear me. This is another technical challenge for us. I believe the messages that have been conveyed this afternoon were really interesting, and they were powerful words. You've spoken about very harsh experiences, sufferings, and many stories that speak about support and hope. And all these support elements have been based on, sorry, but the sound is very bad. Yes, the family support that children need. These are essential pillars. When this support comes from a family environment, but you also spoke about bad decisions, and the consequence is bad support given by some states. And this poses a series of challenges, very difficult challenges for countries. As one of our speakers said, if we want that children and teenagers are the real future, we need to support them in the present and now. It's now when these decisions have to be made. We need to reinforce the help and aid systems and support systems. We need to understand that family reintegration is the way for the future. But this family reintegration cannot be isolated. It has to be supported and backed in a constant and coherent and consistent way in order to avoid the new breakings and pushbacks and problems with minorities. Another challenge is minority children. We have geopolitical problems in many countries of the world, and this affect thousands of children and youngsters. Another relevant point is that there's no one-size-fits-all approaches. We need to learn from other experiences. I'm aware that I forgot some of the fantastic ideas that were expressed today because we had communications problems today. Now, we would like, at this point, to know the opinion of the panelists and participants, because we're going to post a link in the chat in order to have your feedback. It's a survey. This is the link to participate in our online poll. Here you can ask 2 questions. What have you learned? What made you think differently after taking part in this session, after listening to our speakers today? And secondly, is there any additional consideration that the committee had to take into account? You can answer the poll using the chat link. These are the 2 questions.
Se menciona que la prevención es importante.
The importance of prevention, that's one of the things you mentioned. The different experiences of the young around the world excellent recommendations. Young people have to improve alternative care provision around the world.
Es muy importante la prevención.
Importance of prevention and support to families. Another question. In fact, there's not a one-size-fits-all approach. It's not a unique recipe for all. Sorry, but we have no sound. What additional considerations would you like the committee to take into account? That's the second question. The importance of participation of young people in public policy. It's true. That's something important for the states. They need to incorporate young people in the decision-making process.
Sí, también se menciona de que que es importante tomar.
It's also important to take into account the situation of girls and boys living in the streets, street-connected children, children separated from their parents, children who are trafficked. No sound, sorry.
Sí, igualmente se señala o nos indican que debemos tomar en cuenta a los niños que por circunstancias vinculadas a la pobreza, pues también han sido separadas de sus padres o de sus familias. Es que también es importante.
And also it is important to say,
escuchar las voces de los niños, niñas.
It's important, as they say, to listen to the words of young people, child and children, and to take on board their opinion. And also we have to be closer to those who are refugees and who are migrating from one country to the other. Okay. Nevertheless, I have taken several screenshots to read them and see them in detail, in further detail, because now it's going quite fast. And now you can see on the screen the link to have access to the last session of this meeting, of this general discussion. I am going to check if it's the correct link.
Sí. Pues bien, quiero...
Yes, so I would like to thank all the young people and those who participated in this session, having an open discussion through Zoom. And I would like to thank also the discussants for their words. And I would like to thank in general all the participants for their questions and for having participated also in this online poll. And I invite you all to carry on participating on this day of general debate. And I wouldn't like to close this meeting without thanking the interpreters and the sign interpreters who have given us an important support. And I would like to thank the technical support of this meeting, having made possible these that have been made possible this meeting. And with that, we close this session. Thank you.